Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving straight into one of the absolute most fascinating contradictions of the human mind, the paradox of magical thinking. Think about it. Why do we, as totally rational adults, living in this scientifically advanced world, still find ourselves doing these irrational, superstitious things? Well, we're going to explore the deep cognitive and psychological mechanics behind all of this, looking at how our brains process information and why, sometimes, we literally choose to believe things we know for a fact aren't true. So here's our cognitive roadmap for today. We'll start with the paradox itself, dive into some brain mechanics, explore these historical life raft rituals, and then wrap up with the very real modern risks of magical thinking. All right, part one, the paradox of magical thinking. I really want you to ask yourself, why, despite knowing that magic absolutely isn't real, do you still do things like knock on wood so you don't jinx yourself? Or why might you have a lucky sweater you wear on big days? Come on, admit it, you've probably got one. Or why do so many hotels completely skip the 13th floor? We are well-educated, rational people, yet these little rituals just stubbornly persist. And look, this isn't just a minor quirk. Studies show that a staggering 46% of people in Western societies hold at least some belief in the supernatural. Now sure, this varies globally, from just 9% in places like Sweden all the way up to 90% in countries like Tunisia. But to put that into perspective, it proves that holding on to beliefs that totally defy scientific logic is just a fundamentally human trait. It's everywhere. Psychologically speaking, magical thinking is what's called an ontological category error. Now, I know that sounds super dense, but it basically just means we're confusing the categories of reality. We mistakenly believe that our internal thoughts, our words, or symbolic actions can literally physically manipulate the external world, even though there is absolutely zero empirical link between the two. Moving right along to part two, System 1 and System 2, also known as dual process theory. Think of your brain like it's got two completely different characters making decisions for you. System 1 is the fast, intuitive, emotional, automatic responder. It loves quick associations. System 2, on the other hand, is the slow, logical, effortful supervisor. Most of the time, System 1 runs the whole show, because honestly, it's easy and takes very little energy, while System 2 steps in to correct System 1 when it makes a logical mistake. But as you'll see in a second, System 2 doesn't always do its job. To see exactly when System 1 hijacks the steering wheel, we can look at the Trobriand fishermen observed by anthropologist Bronisław Milanowski. When they fished in the calm, totally safe inner lagoon, they used zero magic, none. But when facing the dangerous, unpredictable open sea, they relied heavily on these elaborate magical rituals. And we see the exact same thing today. During the Gulf War, populations under the direct threat of missile attacks showed significantly higher rates of magical thinking. System 1 basically uses these magical associations to give us an illusion of control when we're stressed or terrified. Actually, my absolute favorite example is this experiment where people were asked to drink from a cup they saw being safely poured with water, but it had a totally fake cyanide label slapped on it. People flat out refused to drink it. Their logical System 2 knew it was perfectly safe, but their System 1 saw the word cyanide and instantly triggered this fast emotional fear response. Which brings us to part 3, cognitive acquiescence, or why System 2 just gives in. Psychologist Jane Risen's model actually reveals a massive shift in how we understand our own cognition. When System 1 generates a magical intuition, it turns out System 2 does engage, and it does notice the error. But instead of overriding or correcting that magical intuition like it's supposed to, it actually endorses it. Basically, Risen is arguing that our logical System 2 is kind of a pushover. In moments of really high stress or uncertainty, System 2 totally recognizes that knocking on wood doesn't logically prevent bad luck. But it also recognizes that the immediate emotional relief of doing it is huge, and the cost of doing it is practically zero. So our logical supervisor just capitulates. It consciously allows us to believe what we know is false, simply because the emotional pull and the comfort of the ritual are just way too strong to fight. Okay, part 4, the crisis of presence and dealing with existential dread. Italian anthropologist Ernesto de Martino completely revolutionized how we view folklore. He didn't see magic as some archaic, primitive superstition that modern humans just needed to outgrow. No, instead, he saw it as a highly sophisticated, functional response to what he termed the crisis of presence. This is that terrifying existential dread of losing your place in the world, when grief, illness, poverty, or misery threaten to completely obliterate your identity and your sanity. Magic, he argued, is an adaptive cultural technique. It's a psychological life raft to guarantee the stability of simply being there when the world around you is just falling apart. For example, consider the belief in the malocchio, or the evil eye, which is super prevalent in southern Italy. For a mother whose baby suddenly stops eating, or a farmer whose crops inexplicably die, that internal anguish and total powerlessness are psychologically destructive. By blaming the evil eye, they shift an internal, incomprehensible terror into an external, fightable enemy. They gave their dread a recognizable name and, more importantly, a cure through counter rituals. It quite literally saved vulnerable people from total psychological collapse. So, let's look at part 5, psychological life rafts, and how these rituals actually act as therapy. For centuries, people genuinely believed women in the Salento region were being bitten by a mythical tarantula spider, which caused them to fall into these severe depressive states or convulsive fits. But in 1959, DeMartino took this interdisciplinary team, a psychiatrist, a sociologist, and ethnomusicologist, to go study it. And they proved it wasn't a biological spider bite or mass hysteria at all. It was a cultural script. It only happened in specific territories, aligned perfectly with the summer calendar and the Feast of St. Paul, and it predominantly affected the most marginalized, vulnerable women in a highly patriarchal society. The bite was triggered not by an arachnid, but by major life crises, a forced marriage, the loss of a child, extreme poverty. The ritual itself was designed to cure this crisis of presence. It begins with the onset of the anguish, the so-called bite. Then, the community gathers to play an obsessive, hammering rhythm called the pizzica, driving the woman into this exhausting, convulsive dance mimicking the spider, which could literally last for days. It was a safe, socially accepted space for her to physically express her immense psychological pain. Finally, she receives grace from St. Paul and is reintegrated into the community. The community literally danced a marginalized woman back into existence. It was a profound collective psychological therapy wrapped in magical symbolism. Finally, part 6, the modern risks of magic. It's a double-edged sword. Now, we have to be honest here. Magical thinking is definitely a double-edged sword. When it shifts from being a temporary, comforting coping mechanism into a rigid denial of evidence, it crosses a very dangerous line. It can lead people to waste their life savings on psychic frauds or deny life-saving scientific medicine in favor of unproven remedies. It can also spiral into severe psychopathology, like obsessive-compulsive disorder, where those anxiety loops become totally paralyzing. If I don't flick this light switch exactly 3 times, my family will die. When magical thinking overrides our logical system too entirely, it becomes incredibly isolating, it strains relationships, and it blocks personal growth by trapping people in debunked, rigid worldviews. So it's pretty clear that magical thinking isn't just a relic of our primitive past. It is a fundamental feature of our cognitive architecture, designed to help us navigate uncertainty. But I really want to leave you with this provocative thought. As you go about your day in our hyper-rational, technology-driven society, take a moment to look at your own habits. What are your hidden rituals? What modern magic do you use to calm your anxieties and maintain your own sense of presence in today's chaotic world? Something to think about.